Thank you for this opportunity. And I think you're right in that so many of us women are suffering, not just in our menopausal years, which of course I'm still going through, but since I was born essentially, and was born in 1955. So I just turned 69 years old. And I was born in Buffalo, New York, which is not exactly a warm place. So somebody with a thyroid problem, probably from birth, was really freezing for the first 21 years of my life. I mentioned in my bio that I had my tonsils taken out when I was 3 years old, which I think is still a pretty young age. In fact, I don't even know how many tonsils and add TNA that they're still doing these days. But I was somebody that was suffering so much from respiratory problems that they thought taking my tonsils out would somehow take care of those. Well, sad to say that was not true. I still think that even the tonsillectomy possibly could have caused some damage to my thyroid gland. Again, I don't have the background to speak to that as terms of a surgeon, but I do know that I was freezing cold 365 days of the year, especially in the winters. And no matter how many sweaters, socks, gloves that I put on, I used to go to bed back in the day when I wore PJs, flannel pajamas, a big robe. I would sometimes have a hat on my head, gloves, and I'd be in bed just shivering. And I don't know why the family didn't think maybe there was something else going on, but they did not. And I was just subject to trying to make myself warm all the time, very unsuccessfully, unfortunately. And I used to sleep in a croup tent. I mean, I had all the, kind of classic things going on. I remember my eyebrows losing my eyelashes, the first third of my eyelashes, and my eyebrows started whacking out. The coldness was probably the coldness and the depression were huge, huge in my lifetime. Like many people, we have a lot of other reasons why depression can happen, but I never knew there was a correlation between thyroid insufficiency, hypothyroidism, which is what I have, and depression, but we all know that they go hand in hand.
So I want
Um,
to stop you real quick and just
please.
address those things that you just mentioned. I grew up and I always had cold feet and hands. Now I live in Southern California in the sun and not in Palm Springs where it's really hot right now, but in Newport Beach. And to be cold is kind of wacky, right? So, but I always thought I was weird that I had cold hands and cold feet. No one told me could be my thyroid. Did I ever have my thyroid numbers tested? No. Hair loss and the thinning of the eyebrows, the eyelashes, all of those are classic symptoms of hypothyroidism. And of course, if you have your tonsils, which are right by your thyroid, taken out, of course it's going to be affected energetically, physically, all of that. It's just like when you're pregnant. There's a reason you don't have as much room in your tummy because there's a filling that whole area, and why you might be more constipated because the baby's actually pushing on the intestines.
Oh,
So and then
bingo.
I'm sure you're about to say something about constipation, which is a common sign of thyroid issues. All of that, and then but the big one is depression, and I really wanted to touch on this because most people on antidepressants are hypothyroid. And I
Hmm.
even have one of my very best friends. She can't lose weight. She was working out a ton. She was gaining weight. She was doing this diet thing with her husband. And of course, the husband loses weight and she's gaining weight while doing the same stuff. And she's on antidepressants. And I said, well, have you had your thyroid tested? She goes, yeah, my doctor said it's normal. I said, well, did they test just your TSH? And she said, well, yes. Hey, people, TSH is a pituitary hormone. It is not a thyroid hormone. It's a signaling hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone. So it's from the pituitary telling your thyroid to make T4, which then has to be converted into T3 to actually do something in your body. Dr. Amy Horniman says she doesn't even want to test TSH and T4 because they mean nothing. It's
Right.
all about your T3 and your reverse T3. So I just wanted to really drive that home. If you're on antidepressants, if your mood has shifted, And especially in the last 4 years, because over the last 4 years, with what we've been going through, including the exposure to the spike protein, that has driven hypothyroid symptoms up exponentially. More people than ever. My guess would be at least 80% of the population is suffering from suboptimal thyroid. So I just wanted to emphasize those
Mhm.
things before you continue, Jill, with your story.
No, thank you, because those are such valid points. And for me, the depression was so severe. Interestingly, Lo, I had tons of energy, which of course is not something you would have expected, but I was always being told, "Where's the fire? Where's the fire?" Because I was always racing around to do things. So it was a little odd. And if I look back at symptoms, you'd think, "Oh, you would have thought I would really have been overweight, perhaps, and sluggish." But until I went into my first period, I was underweight and I had a ton of energy, but I also had these other symptoms. And the constipation thing, I mean, I just thought that was every woman's, thing in life. It was like, that's just who we are. And my mom had it. Of course, she never knew she was hypothyroid until she was way into her late 80s, actually, ironically. But for myself, it was just horrible. And I really was so envious of people that could get up in the morning and use the restroom. It's like, what's wrong with me? And I tried every possible thing, eat more fiber, exercise. I'm like, I'm a personal trainer. It's like I'm working out, I'm drinking tons of water, I'm eating fiber, and it was just not happening. So that just kind of added on to more of my misery. And it wasn't until uh, when I left home, I started getting into therapy when I was about 18 years old, just trying to figure out, like, why am I so different from the rest of my family? And I had learned a lot over the years, which I will get to later. But that depression and constipation, the cold hands, no matter where I moved to in the country, Atlanta, it was warmer, still had those symptoms. Same thing when I moved back to Chicago. I'm like in the snow again. I'm freezing there. Moved to New Mexico. It was still happening. And it wasn't until 2000 when a doctor that had just returned from an endocrine, some International Endocrine Society meeting, that they came back with the 50 symptoms of people whose quote unquote TSH was normal, which mine had been up until that time. They, like you just said, they weren't doing so much of the free T3 and free T4. But when he said to me, "Do you have any of these symptoms?" And I had 37 of the 50, and I had had them my whole life, he goes, "Honey, you are hypothyroid, you need medication." And I'm so grateful that he put me on Armour Thyroid first. And I do have a story about that whole thing as well. But he said, he goes, "You're not breaking down your T4 to T3, and you're really suffering."